October means, honestly, stop. Stop trying to be yourself. Stop trying to be your most authentic self. No one cares. Just be spooky.
Hey, happy October. Today we talk about Mexico, we talk about Justin Bieber, as always, and we talk about states. Okay, so it may be 90 degrees here in LA, but it's October everywhere else, and I've got my pumpkin spice coffee from Trader Joe's. I'm going to try it now and see how it is. That's actually quite good. Okay, so first story is Justin Bieber is getting into the CannaBiebs. Following the footsteps of Seth Rogen, of Jay-Z, of Kevin Durant, he is making his own pre-rolls that are going to be a part of Palms, the pretty popular California brand of joints. He's making pre-rolled joints, and they're going to be sold under that banner. They're called Peaches, which is named after his song Peaches on the last album Justice, and I don't know what you think about that album. I think it's fine, but the NPR Tiny Desk version of Peaches is actually pretty good, so you should check that out. Anyway, so he's getting into the pre-roll business, he's getting into the marijuana business, and I expect this to just be the beginning of a whole lot of, or not even the beginning, but part of a whole lot of different celebrities getting into the marijuana business over the next few years, because they're going to see its immense popularity and its immense success. Feel free to predict who's going to be next. My bet is on Travis Scott. Okay, next story. We're going to go back to Mexico, and we continually go back to Mexico and pretty much say the same thing. They're getting legalized marijuana. It's happening. And this story is no different. A top Mexican senator has come out and said that this new session that started on September 1st, they hope to get legalization passed. And as another refresher, the Supreme Court in June had decriminalized marijuana, yet there was no legislation put in place. They kind of put the ball back in the court of Congress, and we're saying, okay, we have decriminalized, now you have to make some kind of regulations around this thing. Of course, which has been happening for years now. Since 2018, Congress has been at a stalemate. There has been opposing sides. They don't know. It's basically coming down to where they want to funnel the money, because they expect at least $1 billion in revenue coming from this bill whenever it does pass. So there's a lot of different opposing forces. This man, Ricardo Monreal, has come out and said basically the same thing that we've been hearing. He says, quote, "At this point in the legislative process, dialogue in both chambers should be privileged to achieve a project that can be voted positively, guaranteeing rights and freedoms of all the people involved through institutions empowered to do so, eradicating discriminatory treatment, blah, blah, blah." So he's just saying, reading between the lines here, or actually, let's finish the quote because he kind of talks about it. In other words, the debate is still alive, and in the parliamentary majority of the Senate of the Republic, we will continue working to offer citizens a law that meets their needs. The debate is still alive. He says it himself, so there's not much of a story here except that they hope to get it done in this session, which started September 1st and is on full steam ahead right now. So hopefully we do hear some actual news. We hear some actual compromise news happening soon. But if it's anything like America, the idea of a bipartisan or multi-partisan agreement is something that is almost always a pipe dream. Now we're going to go to a few states and see what they're doing with legalization. First up is Pennsylvania, my hometown. Last week, 2 Democratic senators had put up a legalization bill, marijuana legalization bill, but that is almost expected. What's more newsworthy is that a GOP senator has put out a bill this week, just today, that would legalize marijuana, and he is a former law enforcement officer. He is basically seeing the inevitability of marijuana being legalized across the country and trying to get ahead of the curve, which is, what GOP should be doing and is doing more and more across the country. Specifically the difference between his and the Democratic bills that are coming out in Pennsylvania, which is interesting, is that his bill the tax revenue would go to law enforcement and youth programs, whereas the Democratic bill, it's more centered around people who have been affected by the war on drugs. So that would be a bit of a difference. However, the end goal is the same, to legalize marijuana and use that tax revenue to better the programs in that state. And you know what, as we talk about this, I'm getting more and more into the idea of just legalizing states and not doing a federal legalization, because when you have different types of legalization in different states, you're getting competition, you're getting better tax revenues or tax rates in one state than the other, and companies will go there and then that state will see what's happening and will have to bring their tax rate down. You're getting this thing, and this is what's happening in film as well, where you have tax incentives in, say, Georgia. Georgia has incredible tax incentives, and you're seeing Marvel, you're seeing a bunch of different companies go to Georgia to, basically exploit those tax rates, and other states have to compete if they want to get into the film biz. And I'm kind of liking that with marijuana. I think that should be a future that we're looking for, as opposed to a federal blanket tax rate, which would end up being really high and worrisomely high to some people because of the idea of an illicit market getting more traction because of it. But anyway, that is a digression. Let's go on to another state. So Virginia did vote to legalize marijuana, and some things have taken effect as of July 1st. However, there is a slow rollout of a lot of these things, where like retail or buying actual marijuana at a store, that won't take effect until 2024. But a general election is happening next month, and they're voting for a new governor, and that basically has a lot of repercussions with marijuana. There are a lot of marijuana advocates in the state saying that this vote for governor is basically a vote for legalized marijuana, because if they vote Republican, they're not going to get the legalized marijuana, and if they vote Democrat, they're going to get it. This is an important vote that's coming up in November for Virginia when it comes to marijuana, and unfortunately, when it seemed like everything was just behind us and we had made it past that barrier, we're right back at another barrier, and things can just easily be rolled back, which unfortunately happens a bunch in government. So while Virginia has already made it there, it might go back or continue on depending on where people go in November. And speaking of November elections, there are elections happening across the country, and Ohio is another state where marijuana is on the ballot in some way, but it's not a statewide ballot, it is a citywide. There are quite a few cities in Ohio that are voting on marijuana because of a citizens initiative ballot push. These cities go from Brookside to Dillonvale, Laurelville, Martins Ferry, MacArthur, Morristown, yada yada yada, the list goes on. It's about 14 different cities who are voting to decriminalize marijuana. That's a big step, and it's almost kind of a smaller scale of what we're seeing across the country, where you see a bunch of states start to legalize and then the country starts to think about it. Well, this is happening in Ohio, whereas the cities are thinking about it, and then the state will have to, if all of these ballots end up in favor of decriminalizing cannabis. It'll be really interesting to see. So while this year the elections across the country didn't seem to be really very important, there are a lot of these small ones like decriminalizing cannabis that are happening across the country, and could actually spell a lot of ripple effects because of these citizens initiatives that are happening. And it'll be fun to see, because as we know, whenever marijuana is on a ballot, it usually goes in favor of marijuana. And that's all we have for Monday. We will be back on Wednesday with some more stories. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to be back on Wednesday. I have a gig, so maybe I'll do Thursday. I'll be back on Thursday with some more stories. See you then.
My Uber driver just said, do you smoke cigarettes? And I said, no. Why? And he said, you smell like cigarettes. And I said, well, maybe it's this bag I'm carrying. Never make assumptions about people.